Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our talk, Michael and Friends, for our Lucerne Festival Friends. And it's an extreme pleasure to welcome Kelly Hall-Tompkins, a real New Yorker. She was named by the New York Times as the New Yorker of the Year in 2017. She's a wonderful musician, a wonderful violinist. She's a festival idea creator. She has visions for the future of classical music, and she's a wonderful personality. Welcome, Kelly.
Vielen Dank. Es ist mir eine Freude, bei Ihnen zu sein. Vielen Dank für die Einladung.
Sehr, sehr gerne. Kelly, before we get into our conversation, maybe let's listen to just a short piece that shows us your wonderful capacity as a violinist. We're going to listen to Eugène Ysaÿe's Solo Sonata number 6 for violin, a daring piece. Let's listen into it. What a beautiful start into our conversation. Eugène Ysaÿe was a wonderful Belgian violinist who created wonderful solo sonatas for the violin, extremely daring, difficult, challenging. I think that's probably one of the most difficult ones.
I think so, yeah.
With the double stops and everything, and the octaves. I didn't like to practice it so much, I must admit, in my old violin days.
I think the piece just spoke to me all of a sudden. I wanted to do something non-traditional for my previous recording, for that recording, Imagination. And I hadn't played the piece before, and I decided to learn it just to record that video. So.
Yeah. Kelly, let's talk a little bit about yourself and your, your life from a child into advancement into classical music, becoming a really great artist today. Having been born in South Carolina to a family that didn't really have that much interest into classical music. How was it? How did you get closer to classical music and the violin, of course?
Well, actually, I was born in Tennessee, but I was raised in South Carolina.
Yes.
And I was raised by two professional parents. My mom had two careers, actually, before she retired early. She was a psychologist by school training. In fact, I was born the day after she defended her master's thesis. And then she became a computer engineer at IBM. And my stepfather was a dentist. And but I think I sifted the classical music out of my environment from an early age. It's almost as if the classical music came with me from another life. We here in America, we have cartoons that have orchestrated and classical music, both standard and original, as a background music for those. And of course, I saw the cartoons on Saturday morning as a child. On Sundays, I grew up Lutheran, which meant that I heard a lot of Baroque music, music of Bach, a lot of organ music. And both of those things were seeping in, and I really resonated with them. And one day, my elementary school took us to see the local orchestra, the Greenville Symphony. And I remember hanging over the balcony, just being transfixed. I think it was Scheherazade that they were playing. And of course, this wonderful, beautiful violin solos. And shortly after that, a string quartet came to my elementary school. And by that point, I was hooked. I said, that's what I want to do. And I knew from day one. I didn't even know exactly what it meant to be a professional violinist. I just knew this is what I had to do.
Wonderful, fantastic. When did you have the first violin?
When I was 9.
When you were 9.
Yeah,
yes,
so
that's not so
yeah, it's not
early.
so early. It's
I think I was
late.
about 6 years when I started.
Yeah,
In my days, they said you can't play the violin before 6 years old. And so I practiced the piano, which I didn't like so much. In any case, so you grew a little bit up with pop music, then you came into your own world of classical music, and you're making such important contributions to this world of classical music. Let's look at the performance this summer in Lucerne, coming up on September 3rd. Your performance of the Wynton Marsalis Violin Concerto in D major, together with an unusual orchestra, the Chiniki Orchestra from London, which is an orchestra comprised mainly of people of color from different nations, and has really grown to become one of the most important projects in the theme of diversity, of admitting new talent to the world of classical music that maybe so far didn't have as many opportunities. But what brought you, as a solid and very, very already famous US soloist, to this project?
I think I just received an email from Chichi Nwanuku a few years ago, and she invited me to play with the orchestra for the first time. I think I've played with them a few times now, including a triple concerto with Chichi in Queen Elizabeth Hall in London, by Erlen Wallen, a wonderful piece. But I think, yeah, I've played with the orchestra several times now, and I really admire what she has done. She's created just an incredible group of players, an incredible performance tradition and practice, and bringing artists from around the world. And I'm really honored to collaborate on this particular piece. It's a very special piece for me. I've played it now 15 times. I love it so much. It was a very unexpected avenue of my career. I didn't know the piece existed. And so I'm really excited to play it at the Lucerne Festival, to return to the Lucerne Festival, and to play this incredibly wonderful and amazing piece.
What do you think is the important role that Chiniki plays in classical music?
I think there's an importance in raising awareness. I think that to challenge assumptions, to challenge inherent biases. I think that her work is really important in that regard. I think at the time that she started the orchestra, there was a little bit more discussion that sounded like, oh, but are there really any players out there of color, and that sort of thing. But I think at the end of the day, her mission, next to awareness and visibility and showcasing, is really just excellence. That's her mission. And I think that I think at the end of the day, that's the most important aspect of what she's accomplishing. Not just getting together an average group of people, but exceptional musicians. And there are similar projects here in the United States, but that's the first one of an international nature, drawing from country, from artists around the world.
I always find a little bit, whether it's here in Europe or in the United States, I travel a lot in Asia, and everybody seems to be complaining that everybody's losing audiences. Of course, we have the most sophisticated marketing techniques, but at the end of the day, do we really look next door? Do we really see who else is there, who could join? Do we know our neighbors? Or do we not want to know them sometimes? And I feel that classical music in a way is always challenged, and the existing audiences are challenged by really also wanting to open up and say, let's have them come in, let them be a part of also our system. And I see that in New York as much as I see it, in bigger cities like Berlin or like Paris and London. Lucerne maybe is not the best example because it's so small, but still the willingness to include others, to me, always seems somewhat limited. Or
Definitely.
at least, everybody knows we should, but in a way we don't. And it's not the times where classical music is sold out at all times.
Well, I mean, several things about that. I think we are in a constant state of evolution, of expanding who we really is and who others are, and to sort of dissolve some of those barriers. I think that it is important that communities not traditionally included have a sense of ownership of the music. I personally have never had a problem with that. This music is mine. Like I felt that from day one. It's in my blood. It's in my DNA. It's in my soul. This is my music. I'm not a visitor to it. And I think that it speaks to me powerfully, and as such, I can render it powerfully to others. And regarding losing audiences, I founded the Pioneer Project to bring classical music to those experiencing homelessness. It's called Music Kitchen, Food for the Soul. We're in our 19th year, and we've brought 135 concerts to homeless shelters and soup kitchens, over 200 artists, and reached an estimated 30,000 shelter clients in 19 years. And the thing that I have learned more than anything is that, well, obviously there's no prerequisite for homelessness. So some of the people that we encounter in the shelters are former major concert subscribers, major donors, and something unexpected in life happened, or they're people who've never heard a live note of music ever in their lives. But in all cases across the board, they're very, very drawn in by the music. The performances are very successful, and we win hearts and minds every time we do these performances. So from that lesson, I've learned that I think the classical music industry can sometimes be very short-sighted when it comes to reaching audiences beyond the traditional communities.
Now, if you go to a normal concert, classical music concert in New York, and in the city of New York, where you have so much diversity, and how many people of color would you find there in an average?
It depends on the institution. It depends on the concert. It depends on, I just served on a panel at Harvard Radcliffe Institute about the future of the fields, and it reminds me also of a time that I served as a grant panelist for the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and I tell this story a lot. We had numerous organizations to decide upon, from large to small. And I was most impressed by a very, very small organization. This is before I started Music Kitchen, but it's always a beacon in my mind of inspiration. It was a tiny organization that had a budget of $25,000, but they happened to have a board member who was a filmmaker. And they interviewed audience members, and subject after subject after subject in the audience said, "We don't care what this organization programs. We trust them, we love them, and we'll be here for it no matter what." To me, that is the goal of every presenter, every organization, to establish that sense of trust, where it's like, we don't care what you present, we trust you, and we will go with you. I think that a lot of organizations are still sort of building that trust. And I think you can go from one presenter to the next and see, sort of looking at the audience, to a certain degree of what their reach is in the community, and what the level of trust is, what the programming signals. Do they try new things, or do they stay with? I mean, I'm someone who absolutely adores the canon, what we have traditionally defined as the classical music canon. I call myself affectionately a classical music nerd. I love, we have 1,000 years of classical music history. I get about 400 of them as a violinist, in terms of repertoire I can play, but I am there for all 1,000 years. I am an absolute devotee, passionate nerd of this incredibly rich history, of which I am part of classical music. But I think that, in some cases there are presenters that could stretch their boundaries, and such as a piece like the Wynton Marsalis Violin Concerto, and other works that are representative of broader voices in the field, and artistic field, artistic voices.
Well, I can tell you honestly, when I was a student at Juilliard back in the 80s, in the 1980s, I would spend less time, aside from my studies, less time in classical music concerts than I did in New York jazz clubs. So that says something. Maybe the difference creates sometimes more attraction, or because you don't have it in your own city, or because I wasn't trained with it. And you on your side with classical music, I maybe for a certain part of my life with jazz, and I hope to return sometime to a more jazz worldy city, because I think it's just great. I just, I adore it. I adore the way of music making, of partnership, and still standing out with solos, but always being together and listening to the other person. I sometimes feel there's a lack of that in classical music. And I also feel that sometimes institutions today, they do what they have to do, but it doesn't feel natural. And I think that you are one of the few artists I know who have this natural feeling and who can move across different worlds. And you have involved yourself even with musical music, Fiddler on the Roof and others. How do you divide, or how do you share among these different styles in your musical life, in your personal life?
I grew up, as I was just saying, I'm just a classical nerd. I would have never, and my education was entirely traditional.
But you
And
listen
in
to
all
pop
of
music
its,
and jazz or not?
I I I definitely still listen to pop music. I am what they call a Swiftie.
Yeah.
I
What's
love
a
Taylor
Swiftie?
Swift and the music of
Oh,
today.
yeah. She
I
was just here
I
in
grew up
Zurich,
on
by the
pop
way.
music.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
But
Oh, tell her I said hi.
she regrets she will not be able to come to your concert in Lucerne on September 3rd.
Oh, that's really too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the music of today, the pop music of today. Still, very an avid fan. I had the most traditional classical music education possible. I had a wonderful education at the Eastman School of Music and the Manhattan School of Music, studying with two of the greatest violinists of our time, Charlie Castleman and Glenn Dicterow.
Yeah,
Um,
of
I
course.
could
Yes.
never have imagined at that time that I would be the artist that I am today. I only saw the traditional boundaries of the field and music making, and I love classical music first. To me, there's no other music that has the ability to express the full range of the human experience.
Hmm.
And I think classical music has the harmonic vocabulary, the rhythmic vocabulary to do that beyond a groove,
Hmm.
which I also love in the context of pop music. And I love jazz. I grew up with some of the recordings in our house, had Itzhak Perlman and Yo-Yo Ma and Wynton Marsalis. I grew up on Wynton Marsalis, the
Yeah.
classical trumpet player. I
Right.
didn't really know Wynton Marsalis, the jazz trumpet player, until maybe a little later. And but I would say that I allowed my sensibilities to evolve
Hmm.
and respond to various life experiences. And they took me in directions I wouldn't have expected. I mean, I took myself, I allowed myself to explore. I think for 5 years, I played with Mark O'Connor, who is a well-known American roots style fiddler slash composer.
Mhm.
And he's the authentic roots fiddle player, whereas I played the contemporary classical music influenced by. So we played a double concerto together. I played as first violin of a string quartet of his music, of his quartets, the bluegrass quartet and old time quartet. Very sort of, if you can imagine, Appalachia meets Bartok. It's that kind of, he brought American roots music into a more formalized, highly complex rhythmic chamber music environment where it was just a really great thing to explore for those 5 years. And having grown up in South Carolina, I didn't know that some of that music was already in me. I thought it was something external, but it was really already there. And I decided to record the Imagination Project, some of which you just heard. I wanted to record this very traditional Izai violin sonata, very virtuosic classical piece, and I wanted to pair it with something a little off the wall. So I paired it with my jazz-inflected arrangement of a very, very beloved song here in America called Pure Imagination from the Roald Dahl book originally, but from the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I don't know if you all know
No, I
that in
haven't.
Europe as well. It's set, it's kind of set in a quasi-European setting, but it's an anyway, I highly recommend it. There's a beloved song that Gene Wilder sings in that movie, the original movie, that has enchanted my imagination my whole life. And so I decided to record a music video of my sort of jazz inflected, fun, whimsical arrangement of that song. And I paired it with this Izai because I knew then that I was exploring something, different sides of myself. And even in fact, before that, In My Own Voice album, I recorded 7 pieces from Bach Chaconne to ethnic variations on a theme of Paganini. I was always kind of pushing the boundaries in ways I didn't quite fully grasp just yet. And then I was invited to be on Broadway as the fiddler, the actual violin soloist for the most recent Broadway production of Fiddler on the Roof. And it was one of the greatest personal and professional experiences of my life, playing the music that was for the production, but also in part written for me in that production, such that I was so inspired to go further and to create the first ever fiddler solo album. So I continue to record those pieces. I'm the first person to create concert music out of the fiddler canon. And I enjoy playing that music as well. So it's a very natural, it just was a very natural and organic process for me to explore these passions and influences. And then when the Wynton Marsalis Violin Concerto came along, here was one place where so much of what I had cultivated in myself had a voice to, I could give voice to so many different sides of my music making, the American roots music, the classical canon. The piece shows such an incredibly vast knowledge that Wynton Marsalis has of the classical music canon, because we see it seamlessly, nahtlos, interwoven into this music that also goes straight into blues and African American Baptist church and fiddling, just all kinds of things. He seamlessly goes in and out of. So I feel like he goes from blues to Mahler. The end of the blues movement somehow ends in a kind of a Mahler-esque sensibility. So all of the parts of my life that I explored somehow now find a home in this piece. But I had the most traditional classical music education. It's just that I keep growing and exploring.
That sounds fantastic. Now, as we're talking about the Marsalis Concerto, why don't we just listen a couple of minutes into this wonderful work we will hear on September 3rd in Lucerne with the Chiniki Orchestra and you. Wow, sounds really, really exciting. There's a lot of jazz I heard, at least in those parts here in the clip, and can't wait for this to happen in Lucerne and to welcome you as a soloist. Last time you were concert mistress with the orchestra, with the Chiniki Orchestra, and now you're a soloist. Lucerne will celebrate you and the orchestra. It's going to be a fantastic moment. Just one last question to you before we end our conversation. We are celebrating the theme of curiosity this summer in Lucerne. What is curiosity for you?
To me, that is like it's my middle name. I'm I'm neugierig. Yeah, I'm constantly exploring new things, trying new things. It is going beyond the bounds of our comfort zone to find new comfort zones and continue exploring, even beyond that still. I think that earlier in my life, as I mentioned, I might not have found this piece. I didn't really have the fully developed sense of curiosity and exploration. It was more bound by these traditional boundaries, like the traditional barriers of what I thought classical music could be. So I think my finding this piece at this point in my life is a very high expression of my curiosity in my music making. And I think that the Wynton Marsalis Violin Concerto is a perfect vehicle for the Lucerne Festival's exploration of curiosity, in the sense that we have a saying in English, go out on a limb because that's where the fruit is.
Right.
And so I think that when you kind of continue to the logical conclusion of your there is no conclusion. It can be endless. Curiosity is just something that I embrace. I'm very passionate about music and about just going in new directions and exploring in every way that I'm drawn to.
Thank you so much, Kelly Hall-Tompkins, for joining us this afternoon. I guess it's earlier in New York, late mornings. And thank you so much for your precious time. And we're so much looking forward to your performance here in Lucerne on September 3rd in the Kekel Concert Hall near the lake. I mean, you've seen the beauty of it. So we can't wait to welcome you. Yeah. And wishing you all the best in a good summer in New York, not too much heat, and then see you Lakeside Lucerne Festival. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I can't wait. Thank you very much.
Thank you.